Yo, JD here, and as you can see, we are on F1 23, and you can see by the title of this video, we are going to be talking about how to get fast on the F1 23, and this is a video I typically do every single year after at least around a week of playing of the game, just to get myself used to it. And every point I'll be discussing in this video, I will most likely be making a completely dedicated video on itself. Otherwise, this will probably be an hour's in length. But these points I'll be going over, I think, are some of the main ones that I really do recommend to be focusing on. And for someone who's been playing these F1 games for well over a decade now at a competitive level, these are kind of the principles that I've been following that I felt really accelerated my potential as quick as possible. But we will be speaking specifically to this game itself, so if you do want more tutorials, tips and tricks, and you actually want one-to-one coaching with me, well, we'll be going through this with you completely directly. Make sure you go to www.coachjones.com. Make sure you enable the notifications on YouTube, because I will be doing a lot of tutorial videos on this game on many of the topics I will be discussing. But starting off with the first one, and one of the most underlooked really aspects of anything really, especially when it comes to gaming, is take the time on your game settings. And what I mean by that is take the time, if you're using a wheel, your force feedback, your calibration, which I've put up on the screen here of mine, what they are. But even if you're using a different input device to me, just take the time to research, find the settings that really suit you, because there isn't really one perfect setting for everyone. It's really going to be quite individual, what you feel you respond to the best, and it's going to be a little bit of trial and error. So really do take the time to find settings with your input device where you're going to be able to feel the car as much as possible. You're going to be able to feel when you're losing traction, when you're having an oversteer moment. Also your camera settings, because obviously this is what you are seeing, so there is no necessarily right or wrong way. You can have a field of view that's very zoomed in, zoomed out. You can use a field of view calculator if you really like to, but just find a setting that you feel comfortable with and you get a good sense of speed. You can see the track quite clearly. You can see where the limits of the track and you feel you're most consistent with and what feels best for you. And that also goes through your on-screen display, just how you're displaying your gear ratios. Like you see, I've got mine in the middle of the screen, your MFD in the bottom right. All these little things actually do matter, and because at the end of the day, this is what you're seeing and this is what you're responding to. So definitely take the time. If you're on PC as well, get your resolution settings, the game quality, the graphics, setting it to medium to low. That's going to give you a better FPS. Recommended to run 60 FPS most of the time, especially if you're on PC, which is still a thing. But please don't hesitate to really spend a good amount of time in this, because if you find yourself chopping and changing all the time, it's going to really kind of hinder your progress and how quickly you can actually make that progress. The second point is learning how to trail brake, and I would say this is more designed for people who are not running ABS, because obviously if you do run ABS, trail braking is not quite as effective. But on this game, if you do run no ABS and no assists, which we will be going into in a second, trail braking is absolutely crucial. And if you don't know what trail braking is, I will be making a video on it. I have done a video on it in the past, which I will link down in the description. Basically, the more you're turning into the corner, the more you're releasing the brakes so hard initially, and the more you're turning in, the more you're releasing the brakes. And just being able to get that muscle memory and balance is going to really transform your lap times, because you're going to be able to carry so much more minimum speed, so much more average speed, and you're going to be so much more consistent as well. And you can see there's a good example of it as we're going through that chicane. So really do learn how to trail brake as much as possible. But again, if you subscribe here, I will be doing videos completely dedicated on this as well. Number 3 is kind of what I was just saying, ensuring that your inputs match the wheel. So as you see, as we go through here, if you watch how to unwind the wheel, look at the throttle. As the wheel is straight, then it's 100%. You really want to imagine if you are using a wheel as an input device, and it's the same really for the controller as well, is whatever you're doing, whatever the steering wheel is doing it in game, either the throttle or braking is mirroring that. So for me, whenever I'm going on the throttle, once I get to 100%, that's where my wheel is practically going to be straight. Whenever I'm using 100% of the brake, that's when the wheel is straight. So whenever your wheel is straight, that's when you can apply 100% force, whether in the throttle or the braking. But the more steering lock you apply, usually the less throttle and the less brake that you'll need to be doing. And if you go on things such as RaceNet, or if you have a telemetry tool available, you'll notice with a lot of the competitive, experienced and esport players, this is something that you will notice within their driving style. And this is something I really go into depth with when I do my one-to-one direct coaching with people. So just really being aware of what your steering wheel is doing needs to be mirrored with what your feet are doing, and if you're on a controller, it needs to be mirrored with what your fingers are actually doing on the triggers as well. The more you realize that, the smoother you're going to be on your inputs, and so much faster you will be as well. The next real point I would say for this game specifically is don't be afraid to use low gears. On F1 22, it was quite well known that the higher gears and the super insane short shifting was quite a big benefit. But in this game, and you've been seeing that in turn 3 here where I've been using second gear, don't be afraid to use lower gears, and you don't have to short shift anywhere near as you had to do on F1 22. I've tried short shifting on this game, I've tried using high gears, and if you're not in the low part of the rev range, or sorry, if you're not in the middle to the higher part of the rev range where it's quite close to bouncing with the rev limiter, you will be bogging down. So don't be afraid to use it. I've seen many other competitive drivers use it as well. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the right or wrong way for you, but I think in this game, definitely having a lower gear selection than the likes of F1 22, you're going to be seeing many benefits from that. The next point I would say is ERS management, which I think is going to be an absolutely huge thing here. And you can see on this last lap at Silverstone how much that actually benefited me. By me being able to save that ERS in Sector 1, I was able to get past 2 cars on that final lap. In 5-lappers here, you'll typically see a lot of people really just exploiting all of their ERS within the first 2 laps, because it's very easily tempted to do it. It's very tempting to do it in the first place. However, if you do that, then you're going to leave yourself very vulnerable. And when it comes to league racing and competitive racing, or if you're doing anything over 5 laps, 25%, now we've got the 35%. ERS is so powerful in this game. Yes, you'll be very strong at the start, but don't overuse it, otherwise you will be putting yourself in a pretty poor position. So just trying to be a bit smarter in the way you use it. Of course, if it's for track position and it's beneficial for you to have a certain track position, then you can, but most of the time you definitely want to have a little bit in reserve. You don't want to throw all your eggs in one basket at one time, otherwise it can be quite difficult for you to actually recover it, and it is quite hard to actually recover the ERS on this game as well. The next point would be understanding how setups work and really learning how to build them, which I will be doing a setup explanation video very soon. I think we just give it a little bit more time in the game just to really see how the setups do actually develop. But right now there is already quite a bit of a trend when it comes to time trial, so I really recommend you going into time trial, seeing the patterns people using, experiment with the setup. So making sure you do read the descriptions, even reading previous videos I've done where I've explained how the setups work, because there isn't really too much of a difference in terms of its effect. But if you can really start to understand how setups work, and you're doing more than 5-lap races, or even if you're doing career mode, once you have an oversteer moment or understeer moment in a particular part of the track, then you can actually confidently make a change which you know is actually going to benefit you. And when it comes to setups, again, pretty much no one really runs an identical setup, even in esports. I've known many drivers who have ran very, very different approaches. So you really got to understand what works for you, but it's very important to know what each change actually does. And you're not just making changes really blindly, not knowing what impact it's going to have on the car and where it's actually going to have an impact when you're driving. And this also goes for all your tire pressures. Tire temperatures are a big thing in this game. You can run up to 107 degrees. That's kind of the operating window. I would say really the sweet spot is still into the really high 90s, so probably 97 to 99 degrees is where you ideally want to be most of the time for optimal performance. So making sure you adjust your tire pressures accordingly, because that is definitely a big sensitive thing now on this game, which again I will be doing a completely dedicated video on. The next point would be to play online consistently. So put yourself really out of your comfort zone. For me, that's the best way of how I improved, was jumping in 5-lap races, 25% races, racing against people who were better than me, putting on the ghost and time trial of people who were better than me, and understand it just takes time to make that progress. Just set the goal small at first, aim to improve by a tenth or two a week. Once you do that consistently, you raise the bar a little bit more, and once you start having better results online, that's when you'll be getting a lot more confidence. And yes, online lobbies might be annoying at first, but we do have a great feature now, which you see in this video, where lap 1 collisions are off, and then from lap 2 onwards they are on. Gives you a bit of time to kind of settle into the race. I would definitely be taking advantage of this feature. And if you'd like to join my lobbies, like you see right here, make sure you do click that join button, because I am doing them on a daily basis with this setting, and usually they are pretty nice, clean lobbies to actually learn something. And that leads me on to really a joining point to this is less is more. So don't spend hours and hours a day just doing time trial, doing the same track for 5 hours straight, or for online lobbies for 5 hours straight. Just understand sometimes less is more. So for me, sometimes I just play 1 to 2 hours in a row, have a break for 3 or 4 hours, and then just come back a little bit later. Or if you are very limited in your day-to-day life, even just doing something half an hour a day, just doing it with a high frequency throughout the week. Doesn't need to be a lot in one go. It's about the quality over quantity. So really important to take breaks, not to overdo it, because otherwise you just kind of get stuck in that muscle memory. And I think it's very important to kind of refresh yourself mentally and physically, because then you're going to be in a much better position to learn a new muscle memory and a more optimal driving style. Number 9 is learning no assists. I think this is where you are going to be hitting your potential. I do believe no assists, even in this game, still is going to be, or is, the faster option. It's going to be allowing you to really maximize your inputs as much as possible, not get into bad habits. So if you ran medium traction, being a lot more aggressive on the throttle than what you will be in reality. Same with learning the trail braking, really trying to maximize that, because that's a huge benefit in this game. Really start making your way towards learning no assists. I would start with no traction first, then I'll go no ABS, and then I'll do racing line last, because track positioning is actually very extremely important. So that's the order I do it in. And again, I will be doing dedicated videos on this. If you have a one-to-one session with me, this is really the main thing we will be going through in the first session. And number 10, and lastly, is just have patience. Kind of ties into less is more, but this does not happen overnight. You do have a few freaks and aliens here and there who are insane from the get-go, but 99% of people have to start somewhere. You have to build this up slowly. So really just have realistic expectations. Just really look to have fun with your driving as much as possible. Don't overdo it. Less is more. And just have a high frequency in practicing this as much as you can. And believe me, it's consistency is key. It's not about the effort you do in one go. It's about how consistently you do it over time. And that's where, for the likes of myself and many other drivers who have been doing this for many, many years, we've kind of built that foundation of muscle memory, which is the reason why from game to game, usually the more experienced drivers tend to be at a high level from the get-go. I really hope there were some good points for you, really just to focus on. As I said, I will be doing many dedicated videos on many of these topics. Make sure you go to www.coachlimitless.com because I am doing my one-to-one sessions now, and thank you so much for many of you who have been booking those. Really look forward to starting that in July. Thank you so much for supporting the videos. Catch you soon. Peace.